Ireland is a land of history, myth, and haunted hotels. Behind the polished reception desks and perfectly made beds, some of the country's most luxurious stays come with something extra cold spots. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers when no one's around, and guests who checked in long ago, but never checked out. In this video, we return to 10 more terrifying hotels across Ireland, where stories of tragedy, ghostly sightings, and cursed rooms have become part of the wallpaper. Some are ancient manor houses, others are modern buildings with a darker past buried just beneath the surface. Each story is real, each location is open for bookings. Welcome to Ireland's Most Haunted Hotels, Part 2. Galgorm Spa and Hotel, Ballymena, County Antrim. Galgorm is known as one of Northern Ireland's most luxurious destinations, a place of calm, of peace, of indulgence. But the land it sits on has never been quiet. Long before the spa and its thermal village were built, the area was farmland that saw terrible violence during the 1798 rebellion. According to local lore, a group of men were killed on the land while trying to escape British forces. They were buried in shallow graves, their names never recorded. One woman, a farmer's wife, swore that she heard them crying at night in the fields, and her story was passed down for generations. When the estate was turned into a hotel, the stories didn't stop. Staff at Galgorm have quietly shared tales of Room 147, a room near the edge of the original manor house. Guests have reported icy air, even with the heating on full. One American couple checked out early after seeing a young man in period clothing standing at the foot of their bed, bleeding from his chest, clutching something in his hands. Another cleaner refused to work alone on the top floor after hearing what she described as marching feet down the hallway, only to find the corridor completely empty. She claimed the sounds were always the same, boots striking the ground in rhythm, getting louder, then stopping dead right outside the room she was cleaning. In 2011, a paranormal research group was granted permission to investigate after multiple complaints from guests in the West Wing. Their report was never made public, but one of the team members leaked a single detail. They believed something had been disturbed during renovations, a residual haunting tied to the land beneath the spa. Galgorm has never publicly acknowledged the rumours, and it remains one of Northern Ireland's most popular luxury destinations. But those who work late at night, the porters, the night staff, the kitchen crew, know the old stories. They've seen doors open with no one behind them, watched figures disappear through walls, and heard faint voices whispering down empty halls. They call them the boys who never made it home. Renville House, Connemara, County Galway. On the rugged edge of Connemara, where mountains meet the sea, sits Renville House, a beautiful retreat that hides one of Ireland's oldest and most documented hauntings. Unlike most hotels, this one has witness statements from some of Ireland's most famous minds. The original house dates back to the 1800s, but it wasn't until poet and writer Oliver St. John Gogarty purchased the estate in the early 1900s that the ghost stories began to surface. It started subtly. Gogarty's guest would mention odd sounds at night, heavy breathing in rooms where no one slept, footsteps on creaking floors when the corridors were empty. But things escalated during a winter evening in 1921. Gogarty had invited friends to stay, including renowned author W.B. Yeats and his wife. That evening, as they sat by the fire, the flames abruptly died, not flickered or dimmed, but died out completely. As they sat in stunned silence, a figure emerged from the cold fireplace, pale, featureless and cloaked in grey. Yeats, fascinated rather than frightened, is said to have whispered, "It does not belong to now." Gogarty was less amused. The next morning, he asked every guest and staff member if they'd staged some kind of trick. No one admitted anything. That same night, a heavy table was heard dragging across the library floor despite no one being in the room. When they rushed in, it was overturned. The hauntings continued. Beds were stripped in seconds. Candles lit by hand would be blown out immediately, even in rooms with no windows open. One guest woke to find the mirror in her room completely steamed, as if someone had been standing inches from it, breathing heavily. She never returned. The house eventually caught fire and was rebuilt, opening again in 1930 as the Renville House. But the spirits, it seems, returned as well. In more recent years, guests have reported waking to the sensation of someone sitting on their bed, only to find no one there. Staff mention cold spots that drift through the halls, a chill that sets in your bones and refuses to leave. One night porter quit after seeing a woman in white glide across the garden, disappearing just before the old stone wall. When he described her, an older local nodded and said, "She was seen before the fire, too." Today, Renville House is proud of its literary past, with portraits of Gogarty and Yeats on the walls. But among the guests, there are whispers of another presence, one who never cared for fame or poetry, and never truly left. The Shandon Hotel, County Donegal. Perched above the wild Atlantic, the Shandon Hotel offers one of the most breathtaking views in Ireland, but some say it hides something far more chilling beneath its beauty. Locals have long believed the land at Marble Hill is cursed. Before the hotel was built, a crumbling cottage stood near the cliff top. Legend tells of a woman who lived alone there during the Great Famine. She begged for food, was turned away by nearby landowners, and was later found dead by the shoreline. Ever since, there have been sightings of a pale woman walking barefoot on the rocks during storms. When the Shandon opened in the 1970s, staff started to whisper about the old one. They said she sometimes appeared in the mirrors of unoccupied rooms, her face expressionless, her dress soaked. Some believed she had attached herself to the land and that the hotel had unknowingly built over her resting place. One of the most unsettling areas is the spa. After hours, when the last treatments are done and the lights dimmed, porters have reported hearing footsteps above the treatment rooms pacing, slowly and steadily. There is nothing above that area but the sloped roof. One former employee recalled a night when she locked the spa at 11 p.m, only to be called by the night manager 15 minutes later. The motion sensors had triggered an alert. Thinking someone had snuck in, they reviewed the CCTV. What they saw chilled them. A dark silhouette, almost human in shape, moving across the thermal suite but with no heat signature and no sound. The image lasted less than 10 seconds before vanishing completely. Guests in room 215, a second-floor suite that overlooks Sheephaven Bay, have told of waking up unable to move, as if something was pressing down on their chest. One man said he saw a figure standing at the window, looking out toward the ocean. His wife had drawn the curtains before bed, and when he turned on the light, the curtains were still shut. Hotel management has never commented officially on the stories, but certain rooms are quietly kept empty during off-season months. One guest, unaware of the legends, left a comment in the visitor's book. "Wonderful stay, but who was the woman humming near the hot tub after midnight?" No staff were on duty in the spa at that time. The Shandon remains a beloved destination, a place of weddings, celebrations and family breaks. But if you find yourself there on a stormy night, listen carefully. Some guests say they've heard sobbing outside their window, even when the sea is calm. Marine Court Hotel, Bangor, County Down. Right on the seafront in Bangor, the Marine Court Hotel has hosted weddings, conferences and holiday makers for decades. But within its clean, modern walls, there's one room no one wants to be left alone in, and one ghost who still waits for music that will never play again. Before the current hotel was built, the site was home to the original Marine Hotel, a grand Victorian structure famous for its ballroom. During the 1920s and 30s, it was the place to be seen. Jazz bands, military balls and seaside dances filled its golden years. That all came to a halt during World War II. In 1941, during the Belfast Blitz, a young soldier on leave named Thomas stayed at the hotel. He'd promised his sweetheart, a local girl named Eleanor, that they'd dance together before he shipped out again. On the night of their planned farewell ball, Thomas was delayed by transport issues. Eleanor waited for him in the ballroom in her blue dress, hair done up, bouquet in hand. Witnesses say she waited until every guest had gone, standing alone in the corner beneath the chandelier. Thomas never returned. His convoy was bombed outside of Belfast. He died before she ever knew. Eleanor's grief became part of hotel folklore. In the months that followed, staff claimed to see a woman in blue gliding across the old ballroom floor, her feet never quite touching the ground. Music would play faintly, even when the gramophone was off. One cleaner quit after she entered the locked ballroom and found a pair of fresh footprints in dust leading in, but not out. The original Marine Hotel was demolished in the 1970s. When the new Marine Court Hotel opened on the same site, it was assumed the old stories would fade away. They didn't. A function room on the second floor used today for weddings and events is said to be where the original ballroom once stood. Staff have reported hearing slow dancing music playing from behind the locked door in the early hours, only for the sound to stop the moment the door is opened. Guests have woken to find their radios playing static, even when unplugged. Others speak of seeing a flash of blue in the corner of their eye, always near the lifts, always just out of reach. One bride left a review mentioning a strange encounter. "It felt like someone was watching our first dance. It wasn't scary, just sad." Security footage has, on more than one occasion, caught a figure entering the function room long after it's been locked, but when checked in person, the room is always empty. Locals still speak of Eleanor the ghost who never got her last dance, and if you listen closely, especially during a stormy night when the sea wind howls up Belfast Lough, some say you can hear the faint echo of a ballroom piano, and the soft shuffle of steps across a floor that no longer exists. The Station House Hotel, Letterkenny. At first glance, the Station House Hotel in Letterkenny seems like any other modern hotel, clean, comfortable and friendly. But beneath its bright exterior lies a shadow from the town's past, the remains of the old railway station and the echoes of those who never left. The original Letterkenny railway station opened in the 19th century and closed for good in the 1960s. The platform, waiting rooms and goods yard were eventually torn down, but some of the foundations were reused when the Station House Hotel was built decades later. The name was meant as a tribute, but some say it was an invitation. Staff began noticing odd things almost immediately. Guests in certain ground floor rooms complained of rattling rails at night, a low metallic clanking that seemed to come from beneath the floor. At first, it was blamed on old plumbing, but the sounds often came in rhythm, as if mimicking the steady beat of a train approaching a station. The front desk once received a midnight call from room 107, a man insisting someone was walking up and down outside his door, dragging something heavy. But when staff checked the corridor, it was silent. No guests had been on that floor for over an hour. One porter, working the night shift alone, said he heard a steam whistle from the rear car park, a sharp, high-pitched blast that cut through the silence. But there were no trains, no tracks, and nothing on CCTV. Then there's the figure. Several employees over the years have reported seeing a man in a long coat and cap walking through the hallway near the restaurant. He never speaks. He doesn't make eye contact. He simply walks in a straight line and vanishes before reaching the wall where the old ticket booth once stood. One former bartender swore she saw the man during a quiet Tuesday night. He appeared near the door, stared across the empty bar, and mouthed something she couldn't understand. She left her shift early and never came back. The eeriest stories, though, come from a maintenance worker who uncovered old railway sleepers under the floor during routine work in the basement. He took one as a keepsake, a chunk of weathered wood still stained with soot. That same week, he reported knocking sounds in his home, followed by dreams of being trapped in a tunnel. When he returned the wood to the site and left it at the hotel, the dreams stopped. Today, the station house remains a peaceful place to stay. The staff are warm, the food is excellent, but if you check in and hear the clatter of unseen wheels late at night, don't be alarmed. It's just the last train to Letterkenny still running, long after the tracks are gone. The Imperial Hotel, Cork City. Right in the heart of Cork, the Imperial Hotel has stood for over 200 years. With chandeliers, sweeping staircases and polished marble floors, it's a place steeped in elegance. But beneath the grandeur lies something else, the lingering presence of one very particular guest, who never really checked out. The Imperial is one of Ireland's oldest hotels, welcoming everyone from dignitaries to artists. But its most infamous guest arrived in 1815, Sir Thomas Grattan, a former British Army officer turned writer. Grattan was known for his brooding personality and fascination with the afterlife. He booked into room 115 for a week and stayed for months, locked away in isolation, writing feverishly. Local rumour says he attempted to summon spirits in the room, part of a manuscript he claimed would bridge the space between the living and the dead. But when the chambermaid entered his room one morning, she found the walls covered in scribbled notes, all written in charcoal, and Grattan lying unconscious beside a candle that had burned down to nothing. He recovered, but barely spoke a word. He left the hotel weeks later and died shortly after. Since then, room 115 has been the centre of strange events. In the 1950s, a guest claimed she awoke to see a man seated at the writing desk, dressed in old-fashioned military garb, hunched over paper. She turned on the lamp. The figure vanished. Housekeepers say the room stays colder than others, even in summer. More than one has refused to enter alone, claiming they feel watched the moment they cross the threshold. The most unsettling reports come from those who find pieces of paper in the drawers, not hotel stationery, but thick parchment covered in smudged charcoal symbols. The handwriting always matches samples from Grattan's old manuscripts. The hotel has quietly shifted guests out of room 115 over the years, especially after one visitor reported hearing someone whispering Latin behind the bathroom mirror. When he asked at the desk if there were any events or performances going on that evening, the receptionist just shook her head. Staff have tried to dismiss the stories, calling them old folklore, but some nights, when the wind hits the side of the building just right, it carries through the corridors and under doors. Guests say they hear it as a whisper, sometimes just their name, sometimes something else. Despite the tales, the Imperial thrives as one of Cork's premier hotels, a place for celebrations and high society. But tucked away on the first floor, room 115 remains quietly infamous. And if you pass it in the early hours, listen carefully. You might hear the scratch of charcoal on paper, and the faint breath of someone writing in the dark. The Ardilaun Hotel, Galway City. Tucked away in a leafy suburb of Galway, just a short walk from the bustling Salt Hill Promenade, stands the Ardilaun Hotel, a former Victorian manor turned elegant retreat. Known for its tranquil gardens and ivy-covered walls, it's a peaceful place. But inside its oldest wing, there's one corridor guests often avoid, not because of the decor, but because of the portraits. The hotel was once the private residence of the Plaza family, a wealthy Anglo-Irish family connected to none other than Lady Augusta Gregory. The family hosted artists, writers, and aristocrats, but over time, stories began to circulate that not all who entered the home ever truly left. When the property was converted into a hotel, the owners preserved many original features, including the main staircase and a long hallway lined with ancestral portraits. These oil paintings are grand, regal, and dignified until you look closely. Guests have reported feeling unsettled walking past them, as though the painted eyes were following them. Some even claimed the heads in the portraits would shift slightly from one side to another, only to return to their original positions when looked at directly. One American couple staying in room 237 told reception they'd seen a woman in a blue dress with a severe bun glide silently past their door in the middle of the night. When they described her, a staff member turned pale. The same figure had been seen by a night porter in 2006, standing at the top of the stairs, glaring down. The most frequent reports involved the painting of a man named William Persa, hung opposite the entrance to the older guest rooms. Several visitors have woken to find the door of their room wide open in the night, even when securely locked, and the portrait angled ever so slightly, as if it had moved to get a better look. Housekeeping staff avoid the wing in pairs. One long-serving employee said she once entered the corridor with a trolley, only to feel the wheels stop completely, as though something invisible was holding them in place. She backed out without cleaning a single room. In 2015, a family hosting a wedding at the hotel had their photographer take pictures along the famous hallway. When they developed the images, one frame showed an elderly woman in period clothing standing halfway down the corridor, someone no one remembered seeing. Management has made no official comment, but it's common knowledge among staff that the older section of the building has its quirks. One concierge is known to warn guests lightheartedly, "Don't talk to the paintings, they might just answer back." The Ardilaun remains one of Galway's best-loved hotels, a perfect blend of old and new. But if you ever find yourself walking its upper halls after midnight, do yourself a favour. Don't look back at the portraits, because some of them are definitely looking at you. The Park Hotel, County Waterford. The Park Hotel is known for its welcoming atmosphere and family-friendly charm, but tucked away at the far end of the second floor is a suite that staff try not to mention, a room that some say should have been sealed off long ago. The story begins in the late 1980s, shortly after a major renovation. During construction, workers uncovered the remnants of an old well beneath what would become room 248, a small, stone-lined shaft, long filled in and forgotten. Locals whispered that it once belonged to a cottage destroyed during a cholera outbreak in the 1800s, when many families were forced to abandon their homes. Not long after the hotel reopened, guests in room 248 began reporting strange disturbances. The most common was the sound of a child laughing a sharp, high-pitched giggle that would echo across the room just as the lights flickered. One woman was woken at 3 a.m. by the sound of marbles rolling across the wooden floor, except the hotel carpeted all rooms that year, and there were no marbles. A businessman staying in the suite for a conference told reception he was deeply disturbed by a child standing at the foot of his bed. She didn't move, didn't speak, and when he turned on the lamp, she vanished. When staff investigated the next morning, they found something odd. Tiny, muddy footprints across the tiled bathroom floor, despite the room being locked and cleaned hours earlier. Things escalated in 2003, when a cleaner entered room 248 and came out minutes later, pale and shaking. She said she'd heard humming behind the curtain. When she pulled it back, there was nothing there, except a soaking, wet, child-sized handprint on the glass. That cleaner refused to return to the room, and from then on, the hotel quietly began placing solo guests or short-stay visitors in 248 rarely families and never children. One night, Porter says he was walking past the room just after midnight when he saw a light flick on through the frosted glass. Thinking a guest had arrived late, he checked the registry. The room was unoccupied. When he opened the door, the light was off and the room was ice cold. To this day, the staff still leave a small lamp on in room 248 at all times, even when it's empty. Just in case she doesn't like the dark, one receptionist said with a nervous smile. The Park Hotel thrives with weddings, holidaymakers, and weekend getaways, but if you find yourself in room 248 and hear the soft giggle of a child when no one else is around, don't be alarmed. She's just playing. She always is. The Killarney Plaza Hotel, Killarney, County Kerry. In the heart of Killarney town, surrounded by bustling shops and picturesque parks, sits the luxurious Killarney Plaza Hotel. Modern, stylish, and always busy, it seems the last place you'd expect a ghost story. But ask any long-term staff member, and they'll tell you about the phantom floor. The plaza is built over an old network of tunnels and storage basements, remnants of older businesses that once stood on the site. During construction in the early 2000s, workers reported odd encounters, tools vanishing, voices in sealed-off rooms, and more than once the sound of an elevator arriving when none existed yet. Those stories were brushed aside, until guests began reporting something stranger. Multiple visitors described taking the lift from the lobby, only to have it stop between floors. The doors would open into complete darkness, a long corridor with no windows and no lighting. One woman swore she saw a man in a porter's uniform from the 1940s standing at the end, looking confused. In every case, the lift would then jolt and carry them to their intended floor. When they told staff, they were met with blank looks. There is no floor between levels 1 and 2, no accessible corridor, no lights to malfunction. A former night manager once investigated after a guest became hysterical, insisting she'd stepped out into some kind of abandoned hallway. She'd even left her room key on a small table by the wall. When they checked, there was no table, no hallway, and no trace of her key. Security footage, strangely, showed the elevator doors open for 7 full seconds to nothing. The hotel quietly consulted contractors, who confirmed that there is indeed a sealed-off section behind the elevator shaft once used for cold storage by the previous building. It was walled off and never connected to the current floors. Still, guests kept reporting flickering lights, static on the in-room TVs, and cold spots in the lifts. One cleaner, working the early shift, claimed she heard old-fashioned music, something like a gramophone, playing faintly in the lift one morning. She got in, thinking it was someone's phone, but found herself riding to an unlisted level. The doors opened, and there was only darkness. She pressed the emergency button. The lift jolted and returned her to the lobby. She quit a week later. The Killarney Plaza remains a top-tier destination. Most guests enjoy their stay without incident, but every so often a lift will pause, sigh open, and offer a glimpse into something long forgotten. A piece of the past, sealed off and buried, but not quite gone. If it happens to you, don't step out. Just wait. The doors will close again. Eventually. Cabra Castle Hotel, Kings Court, County Cavan. Set among rolling woodlands and towering stone walls, Cabra Castle looks like something from a fairy tale, but it holds a tragic story that's been retold in whispers for generations. Ask anyone who's worked there long enough, and they'll tell you, the Bride of Cabra still walks the halls. In the 1780s, long before the current hotel was opened, the castle belonged to a wealthy family whose name has since been lost to history. A young maid named Sarah fell in love with the landowner's son, a romance that was secret, forbidden, and doomed. When the affair was discovered, the boy was sent to England. Sarah, now pregnant, was cast out. But she never left the grounds. One cold November morning, her body was found near the edge of the estate woods. Some say she was attacked while trying to escape. Others claim she jumped from one of the upper balconies in despair. The truth was buried with her, somewhere on the grounds. When the building was eventually converted into a hotel, guests almost immediately began reporting unusual activity, mostly in the oldest section of the castle. A woman in a white dress was seen gliding down staircases, weeping softly. Maids would enter freshly cleaned rooms to find muddy footprints across the floor, as if someone had walked in barefoot after a storm. In one of the tower rooms now used as a honeymoon suite, a couple reported hearing sobbing just outside their door on their wedding night. When the groom checked, there was no one there. But the hallway smelled faintly of wild roses, despite no flowers nearby. The most chilling tale came from a bride staying the night before her wedding. She awoke in the early hours and looked into the mirror, only to see another woman pale, dressed in an antique bridal gown, standing behind her and mouthing something she couldn't hear. The bride turned in terror. The room was empty. Staff have found doors locked from the inside with no one within. A photograph taken in the 1990s during a wedding reception shows a blurred figure near the main staircase, not quite in focus, but distinctly wearing a flowing dress, her face hidden beneath a veil. They say Sarah still wanders the castle looking for the man she loved, or perhaps the child she never got to hold. She is not angry, just lost. Today, Cabra Castle is one of Ireland's most picturesque wedding venues. But if you choose it for your special day, remember this: one bride never left. 10 hotels, 10 hauntings. And yet, these are only the stories we know about. Across Ireland, every old building has its secrets, a locked room no one uses, a guest book with names no one remembers writing, a cold breeze that passes through closed windows. Maybe it's just the wind, maybe it's something else. So if you ever find yourself walking down a hotel corridor late at night and you hear footsteps that don't belong to you, don't look back. Thanks for watching Irish Ghost Stories. Subscribe for more haunted tales from Ireland's darkest corners.